Well, hello, and welcome to today's episode of Afternoon Coffee and Conversation. We've been highlighting aspects of National Adoption Month for the month of November. And as part of that, I sat down earlier this week with Mandy Harrel, the Executive Director of Christian Family Services out of Gainesville, Florida. And we had about a 30-minute conversation about adoption just in general terms. And so I'm going to roll that pre-recorded interview now, and then I'll be back at the end to have a few concluding remarks and previews of coming attractions. So without further ado, let's roll the tape. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session of our Afternoon Coffee and Conversation. And I'm joined today by my guest, Mandy Harrel of Christian Family Services out of Gainesville, Florida. And there's a reason why I picked Mandy and this organization to feature for this segment, and that is this is where we adopted our daughter from 12 years, a little over 12 years ago, and they were a really good agency to work with, so I thought I'd invite Mandy, who is recently the new executive director of the organization, to come on and talk to us a little bit about adoption just in general. So how you doing down there, Mandy?
I'm well, thanks.
How are things how is it sunny down there? Tell me it is.
It is, and it's been a little cooler than usual, so that has been nice for.
Okay. Oh, I love the Florida weather. I grew up in Alaska, but I really despise winter, and I envy you for getting to be down there in the winter months. So, but if you would give us a quick bio about yourself and how long you've been there at CFS and.
Sure. I started directing CFS in August of 2024. I took over from Jerry Callens, who led CFS faithfully for 22 years. He's been very gracious during the transition and still continues to mentor me today. I'm an attorney by training, and prior to CFS, I spent 11 years with the Florida Guardian Ad Litem office, and so children and families have always been on my heart, and my career has been focused on serving children and families. In my private life, I'm married to my husband, Grant, who is a physician, and we have two daughters who are 14 and 11.
Wow, my daughter's 12, so they're right up there in the same age range. Now, there is one question that comes up. This came up occasionally when we were starting our process, and I kind of want to deal with it and sort of get it out of the way. One of the early adoption agencies that we spoke to, the question came up about if we're, and this sort of is based on a real incident that I know of and a couple of close calls where if I'm 5 or 6 years down the road and the birth mother shows up or the father and says, hey, I want my child back, I asked this question to an adoption agency and she wasn't wearing glasses, but if she had these readers on like I do, I think I would have gotten this look. And she said, you've been watching too many Lifetime movies. Could you address that for just a little bit for people who would have that concern?
Yes. In Florida, the moment that the birth parents sign the consent is final for them, and the consent is irrevocable unless it was procured by fraud or duress. And so I think that if everything is done properly on the legal end, that there really shouldn't be too much danger of someone appearing 5 or 6 years down the road.
Yeah, and that's what we were told, and so far that's what I've found to be. I was a legal assistant, by the way. I didn't do any family law. It was mostly corporate litigation, but I did get a little taste of it just in my schooling. Now, let's talk about a birth mother who's just found out she's pregnant. She's assessing her adoptions. She comes to you. What do you tell her? What does the process look like?
So women contact CFS with unplanned pregnancies, and sometimes they are not sure whether they want to enter into an adoption plan or not. If they choose to parent and not enter into an adoption plan, we try to help them with that and provide some case management and maybe even assistance in doing that. But if a woman wants to make an adoption plan, then we allow them to do that, and we're able to provide some support and go down the road of adoption.
Okay, now, so if she comes to you but says, I really don't want to adopt, do you have other means to help her out?
We do. Our primary focus is adoption, but we do have a small benevolence program where we can provide some assistance, and we have a caseworker on staff who works with women who want to parent as well.
Okay. And can you talk also a little bit about what's the difference between open and closed adoptions? And are there degrees to open adoptions, or is it all one or the other with no middle ground?
Sure, there are definitely degrees. Open adoption is when all identifying information is exchanged between the adoptive family and the birth parents, and they maintain some level of ongoing contact after the adoption. Years ago, closed adoption, where there's no contact, no information exchanged, was the way things went. But since then, research has shown that it's beneficial to adoptees and adoptive families to have open adoption. But there are levels, and I think the most common situation is probably a semi-open adoption, where not all identifying information is exchanged, and birth parents and adoptive families have contact that has been agreed upon, and that might look like using an app to share pictures and updates, or using an email account designated for that, or scheduling visits at the same time every year.
So there's an app for that?
Yes.
There's an app for everything, isn't there?
Several, yes.
I'd never thought of that. I didn't know there wasn't. Now, my wife is also adopted.
Okay.
Adopted in 1907. We won't go there. And that was back in the days when everything was closed. And we did try at one time. She went back to the agency and found what little information that was not redacted was pretty well useless. Now, can a birth mother or a family change their mind if they say, okay, we want this totally closed? Can we change our mind down the road to go for an open adoption, or would that be pretty much non-available?
I think situations like that are very fact specific, but certainly if both parties are comfortable with making the change, I think that it could happen.
Okay, because she knew someone who put up a child for adoption through the same agency, and that birth mother, because of the circumstances, goes in and updates her file every time she moves or gets a new phone number because she wanted the child to be able to find her. So would that be available then, I guess, to somebody like a birth mother who...
Yes, and in Florida specifically, there's something called the Florida Adoption Reunion Registry, and birth parents sign up for that and keep their information current through that. But also when you use an agency, like CFS is a licensed child placing agency in the state of Florida, licensed through the Department of Children and Families, we have some search and reunion responsibilities or duties. And so we do spend a fair amount of time facilitating communication between adoptees and birth parents. And, we use documentation that we had at the time, and we contact people as needed and try to understand what their preferences are currently, because as we all know, preferences 30 years ago, can change. So.
Yeah, 30 seconds ago they can change in some cases. What would you say is, if I come in, my wife and I come in and we say, hey, we'd like to adopt, what would you tell us about as far as average wait time? And then I'll tell you what our experience was, but what would you say if we come in today? Is there an average wait time that we could look forward to, or?
Sure. Again, this is a very fact-specific thing. If I had to throw an average out there, I think I would say 2 years, but it really depends on preferences and, many factors that are outside of the control of the adoptive family, because oftentimes the birth parent chooses the adoptive family, and sometimes adoptive families have gender preferences or racial preferences and different levels of comfort with possible drug use during pregnancy or medical issues that a child might have. And so weights can vary dramatically due to these factors. And so it could be longer than 2 years. It could be much shorter than 2 years.
Ours was much shorter. We contacted CFS, I want to say, in about April or May of 2012. And Debbie Callens, who at the time was the, I think her title was senior social worker or something like that. She came, did the home study, we were waiting, and then we were at church one day in July of 2013, and somebody asked my wife, well, how's it going with your adoption process? And she said, oh, it's going to be a while for a birth mother to pick us out. And I was kind of keeping an overnight bag. I was envisioning having to, immediately go to Miami or somewhere in a hurry. That afternoon, I took a bike ride. I'm getting out of the shower. I hear her phone ring, and she was making some peach jam that we had at church, some frozen peaches. And I hear the phone ring, and I thought it was somebody from church calling to ask about the jam. And she comes running. It was a hardwood floor, so you heard everything in the house. She comes down and hands me this envelope, and it's got just a bunch of words on it, and it's all gibberish in my mind right then. But it was Jerry calling to say there was a baby for us. Born on Friday, he called us Sunday. We picked her up Tuesday.
Wow.
So I tell people we became instant parents. You didn't even have to add water. So we brought her right home. Fortunately, we had everything ready. We had a little cosmetic with the nursery we wanted to do, but that was no big deal. We had a changing table, we had a crib, we had everything we needed. So what if now that was a case there where it was fast and furious and we got it. What about disruptions in the process? I've known of a few people who had some disruptions. The main disruption I have found is one of two things. Either the birth mother changed her mind, or in one case, the adoption agency went out of business. Are there interruptions that sometimes happen along the way that might make me as an potential adopted family have to, go back to the starting gates?
Yeah, we are very open and upfront about the possibility because placements that we make are at risk until termination of parental rights and the finalization of the adoption occurs. I think that's why it's very important that you work with a licensed adoption agency and an ethical adoption agency or adoption attorney, and we're very careful about the point at which we introduce an adoptive family to the situation, but obviously we can't predict everything that might happen, and so we just, at CFS, we opt for just upfront communication, and we keep everyone in the loop with what we know, but that is a possibility with adoption, and we try to be careful about who we work with so that we can try to mitigate that risk.
I had a co-host who was going to join me, but he had a medical emergency with a parent that he's in Tampa, in fact, and he is dealing with some things that have popped up in his adoption process. And I'm going to hopefully get him on that he can talk a little bit more about that. But that was part of the reason I wanted to bring up that question. Now, how does it work with finding a match? I had mentioned we were waiting for an adoptive or a birth mother, rather, to pick us out. How do you go about the process of matching a birth mother with a potential family?
So we have waiting families that we approve to adopt here at Christian Family Services, but typically it is, the birth mother's choice, and they choose, from our waiting families, or if for some reason they have some preferences that our waiting families don't fall into. Sometimes we network with other agencies, or other agencies network with us looking for adoptive families. And so typically what we do is when the birth parents are ready, we show them profiles of families based on their preferences, and then they would choose one, and then we'd begin the process of meeting.
What about the fathers of the children being put up for adoption? What say, if any, do they have in all of this, or are they included ever, or how does that work out?
So it depends on whether they're a legal father or a prospective father. If they're a legal father, the law requires their consent as well. If they're a prospective father, the law requires that they be given notice about the adoption plan. But prospective fathers can also choose to decline any rights that they may or may not have to the child. And so if the father is a legal father, then he could be involved in choosing the family as well.
Now, when you say prospective, is that a case where paternity is questionable?
Yes, or just if the expectant mother is unmarried and she has named someone, that doesn't make that person the legal father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about education? We had worked in a couple of church-related group homes, and so we were licensed foster parents. What does the education or fostering requirements for the adoptive family? If we come in and we say, "Hey, we're interested in adopting," what do we have as far as that goes?
Yes, an adoptive family must have an approved home study, which is an independent investigation that verifies their suitability as adoptive parents. And part of that home study requirement, in Florida at least, includes 21 hours of training. CFS provides quarterly trainings for adoptive parents, and there are other approved providers of trainings, and training can be done online as well. But in Florida, at least, you have to have 21 hours.
Yeah, and that's a requirement I know in Oklahoma, Colorado, and Texas, because we've lived in all those states, well, except Texas, but we have looked into using adoption agencies there, and I think that's pretty much across the board in all 50 states. To get the hours may vary, but it seems like to me like it was something like 20 or 25 hours in that ballpark in Colorado. Now, I know each situation is different, but roughly what would it cost for a family, and how do the lawyers work? Do I have to get my own lawyer, or does CFS provide counsel in that regard, or how does that play out?
So I'm hesitant to throw out specific numbers, but I think it's a known thing that private adoption through private agencies can be pretty expensive. Maybe we're talking up to $60,000. CFS is different though. We're a nonprofit, and we collect a placement fee, which is we use a sliding scale based on income, and so that's very different than what a lot of other agencies do. And so it's a little bit hard for me to generalize when we really are so different in the space. We don't pass on birth parent expenses directly to adoptive families, which a lot of agencies and attorneys do that, and that can drive up the cost of the private adoption. As far as lawyers go, they are necessary for an adoption. As for the termination of parental rights, CFS uses a lawyer, and I am currently providing that legal representation because I'm an attorney by training. And then at finalization, the family needs to have a lawyer to finalize as well.
Okay, I think we had the same lawyer for that. See, I can't remember his name, but he joined by phone.
Yes, and that would have been Mitch Albaugh, and and
that's
so
who it was.
It's very common in the adoption world for the same attorney to do the termination and the finalization. The family though does need to waive the fact that there could be a conflict because the attorney represented the agency at one point and then is representing the parent at the adoptive parents at finalization. So you can see it done different ways. They could get independent legal counsel if they wanted to.
I think Amelia was about 5 months old when we went to finalize. And I just remember she refused to wear her shoes. She kept kicking them off. And the attorney, I remember Mitch on the other end said, "I'd like to inform the court that I have also kicked off my shoes," and was, kicking back. And he didn't want to be found in contempt, I guess. But that was the one thing that was sort of provided a little bit of amusement for everybody in the room. And that was a judge who I think retired not long after that. I don't know if we had anything to do with that, but, kind of went into retirement at that point. Now, how do you address concerns about confidentiality? Because I know that's another big thing, especially if you're dealing with an unplanned pregnancy. And if somebody comes to you, say a teenager, how does confidentiality and things like that play out in this?
Sure. In the court system specifically, there are separate case numbers for the termination phase and the finalization phase of the case. And that's so that the adoptive families won't have total access to the birth parents' information. But as you can imagine, it is important to have medical information and medical records. And so our birth parents do sign a release allowing records to be disclosed to the adoptive families. And we provide family, social, and medical histories to the adoptive parents. And often those are cleansed of specific identifying information, but they contain enough information to understand any medical needs.
Okay. And speaking of medical needs, what sort of assistance would you have for a birth mother who comes to you? Maybe she's from a very low-income family, needs medical help. Do you have anything that you can offer to assist her at least with medical care that she might need?
So many of our birth mothers are eligible for Medicaid, and that usually covers their medical experience or expenses. And but if for some reason something wasn't covered, we do have funds that we can assist with, and sometimes private insurance would cover that as well.
Okay. What about things like housing? If, say, mom and dad have found out this girl's pregnant and they've kicked her out of the house, or she just doesn't feel like she can go home. I knew somebody in Colorado that opened her home up to unwed mothers in this situation who came. They weren't, I don't know of any of them that were kicked out, but they did come from out of state to give birth and then go home. Do you have any help with housing or other living necessities that you could help with a birth mother?
Yes, the law allows us to pay reasonable living expenses for expectant mothers, and that is something that we help with.
Okay. And then do you deal only with adoptive families in the state of Florida, or do you consider clientele from outside of Florida?
No, we can place with families from all over the United States. It's just that we have to follow the interstate compact on the placement of children, and so that the out-of-state families would need to come to Florida to accept placement, and they couldn't leave the state of Florida until it is approved by the ICPC. And
Okay.
but yes, we have waiting families who are both inside of Florida and outside of Florida.
And then they would have to comply with Florida law, like for the 21 hours of education and that sort of thing.
Yes.
All that would have to be complied with, even if I'm living in Illinois, say, that would have to be complied with.
Yes, because CFS, the adoption agency, is located in the state of Florida. We follow Florida law.
Okay. And then, we're just about out of time. If somebody wanted to contact CFS, either to a birth mother or a family, or maybe someone wants to make a donation, how would they do that?
Yes, They could look at our website, which is www.cfsfl.org. They could also call us at 352-378-6202, and we'd love to hear from anyone.
Okay, and you are in Gainesville. I don't think we mentioned that, but you're right.
Yeah.
You're right across the street from the University of Florida, as I recall.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I'm from Alabama, so we won't get into the
Oh,
Roll
no.
Tide Gator
No.
thing going on. Yeah, I was born in Montgomery, so. But yeah. So we meet you, I think, about every 2 or 3 years, either in Tuscaloosa or down there. So.
Hasn't been pretty for us recently either. So.
It's kind of mediocre now for Alabama since Saban retired. They've had their issues too. So, it's probably going to be, what do they like to, they like to call that a rebuilding phase, I think, well, Mandy, I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you would just like to add in there for viewers and listeners who will be watching this on Friday? It's Wednesday now as we're recording, but anything else you think we might have missed that would be of importance to bring up?
I just want to say that CFS is a unique agency, and we're a ministry, and we're passionate about helping women with unplanned pregnancies. And when we do have women who enter into adoption plans, it's an honor and a blessing to be a part of making families. And I just want to thank everyone for their support, and we're happy to educate about adoption anytime.
Let me ask one other question, and this, I don't know how may or may not be a sensitive one for people, but do you have to be a member of any particular church to come to CFS and either adopt or place a child through you?
No.
Okay. I do know some that require you be a member of that particular faith group, and so I had meant to ask that earlier and just forgot to do it. So that is good to know. But I thank you for being here. I thank you for your time. And we'll see if maybe you can get some contacts from this. But I really do thank you for taking part in National Adoption Month and trying to make people a little more aware of what we have as far as choice and in adoption. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Let me. And that was my interview with Mandy Harrel of Christian Family Services in Gainesville, Florida. If you'd like to contact CFS, you can do so through their website, cfsfl.org, or you can contact one of their offices in Tallahassee, Gainesville, Jacksonville, or Ocala, Florida. Now, sometimes a birth mother, she gives birth, after being pregnant, maybe she's hidden the pregnancy. She has no idea where to turn or what to do at that point, and that can lead to tragedies such as this. This was in Austin, Texas in September of this year, and similar instances occur around the country. Well, there is an answer to tragedies like this, and this is probably, I would say, the least known and least understood aspect of adoption, and that is safe haven. Next time, we'll be talking to Monica Kelsey, founder of the Safe Haven Baby Boxes. And we're going to talk about Safe Haven and these baby boxes. And she has an interesting life story to tell that she'll go into during the interview. This will be a pre-recorded interview that will air on Tuesday, November the 11th, 2 p.m. Central Time. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment on these videos and share them. Check out my Patreon page as well as my Substack page where I publish at least once a week. And if you really like these videos, help those algorithms out by giving them a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and be good to yourself this week. And if you possibly can, be good to somebody else. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.